Okay, so I've been going over this video in my mind. First of all, welcome to the about 20 subscribers I got probably over the last few weeks. I sat at 121 for a long time. I wanted to talk about Christianity because some out in the world there's kind of this problem with identity particularity and extremism in identity particularity, and absolutely the identity particularities that come to us through history, like the major religions, are the most problematic because they, in their extreme sense, because they've, developed over time. Everybody knows about them, so their extremist elements are much larger and well supported than the extremist elements of other identity particularity groups. The next would be classist identity particularity. There would be nationalist identity particularity. And I wanted to talk about Christianity because I grew up Christian, like since third grade. I went to Maranatha Christian Academy in Orange County. My mom put me in that school. So that's 6 years old. And one thing I just remember about that school, it was fairly nice. It had a big chapel in the middle and stuff, but the corporal punishment, like that they swatted people. I think maybe schools at that time, I'm 52, so, 40 something years ago, the schools at that time, they did that at public schools probably too. They swatted people. So I think I got swatted a few times throwing rocks at cars. Other people drove me to do that. The point being that the punishment never really stopped us from doing the things that kids do wrong. And then, as I got older, I went to a regular public school, and I actually, prayed every night and tried to save my friends and stuff. And I was actually successful. I saved a few of my friends, and I loved that. It's like a badge of honor, right? One of them went off the rails, and another guy turned into a full-blown Nazi. And later he blamed me too. And I can't help the guilt. He said, well, if I am like that, that's your fault, because you're the one who got me into this. And he's right. He's so right. After I rebounded, he never rebounded. And I feel so terrible and guilty about that. But anyway, so middle school, my mom would like to go to these churches that were like biker churches, and you listen to Christian metal and stuff like that. So we were still quote unquote cool. None of that stuff is really good though, because there's such a small pool of talent to pull from. So the music's meh, it's just something about that, the rest of the world has a large pool of talent to pull from, so that the bands and the music that's good is actually better, Around this time, 16, 17 years old, I started to question reality, why can't I just look at the facts and basically just let it be the fact while I'm a Christian, And then, this is a basic story of Christianity, that you can't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And it's the basic anti-intellectual fundamentals of Christianity that we're not supposed to think, or they're not supposed to think, and they're supposed to have faith. They're not, and their faith is supposed to be strong. And that's really where the delusion begins, as soon as you have to start ignoring reality for faith. And that's where the masturbatory kind of perverted aspect of it begins, because that's where the opportunism begins. That's where value actually becomes valueless. It just becomes opportunistic. It's like everything that's good happens is because of God, and everything that's bad that happens because of the devil. And so, it's just this kind of weird reactive opportunism. But anyway, so I was never satisfied with that. I didn't want to deviate from reality. And so that was where the decline started for me, when I got old enough to pay attention to reality. And there was one other thing. It was that, and then there was one other point. The other point was that it didn't offer you true comfort, okay? Because Christianity is filled with this, the path is narrow, and you have to do, there's different schools of thought about how much work you have to do. Some people will say it's right after you're born again, that's good enough, and others will say, you have to show the effort. But the point is that you're left with this question in your mind, Have I done enough to be saved? Am I really saved? And you never know, and it's all because of that. The path is narrow, and so that notion, the path is narrow, drives the extremism in Christianity, because people believe that they have to become pastors. They have to be the faithful of the faithful, right? They have to set an example, and then they'll be on the narrow path and actually be saved from all these, I'm sorry, but fabricated punishments and rewards. Those two things, I couldn't deviate away from reality. And I didn't feel, and this is really a transactional thing, I didn't feel like it provided me with comfort, that it actually made me depressed. So I just slowly went off and skateboarded and went surfing and went and partied, lived at the beach. And it wasn't that drove me away, okay? Because you can still party and be a Christian. I mean, you're not supposed to, but people do it. So, but that wasn't it. It was those two things that I mentioned before. Anyway, I just went out and started living my life, but the curiosity never went away. So the first thing I did is I started studying all religions that I could. I studied everybody's holy book to see exactly where they were starting from. I read the Satanic Bible. I read the Quran, multiple translations. I studied Buddhism. That's basically the crux of it. I studied their histories too, because those are the religions that I'm exposed to. And what I noticed was, basically that the Abrahamic religions are sort of like a cage. They really want to put you in a prison and keep you there. Whereas Buddhism is more like a seed, right? It teaches you something, and then it's just up to you. It doesn't tell you you're terrible and in need of redemption, which by the way, isn't that called, I think that's called the hook from basic salesman technique, the hook. They sell you a disease that they have the cure for. Religions, the Abrahamic religions anyway, are just one big hook scam, in my opinion, that provides reward, but it also takes something away from you, something invaluable. I started studying all the major religions, and none of that taught me how to be a good person. I learned that Islam is about insisting upon law. Christianity is it really is an opportunism that relies on interpretation. You can do all kinds of interpretations that say all kinds of things. And so it's something that pretends to be something when in fact the outcome is that nothing's there and that anything is justified. It creates an everything is permitted mentality while making the person think they're absolutist. It's the worst thing that could happen to humanity. It's the worst thing that can happen to people outside of Christianity, is that everything is permitted, but actually I'm the one who's the lawbringer. That kind of mentality where it's absolutely contradictory and the people that are within it don't know. And the reason why they don't understand is because they don't understand true justice, okay? Because what they're doing is more authority-based and following, and then manipulators come in and manipulate them. True justice emerges from the deterministic aspect of physical reality in the moment. I'm one, you're one. There's symmetry. If I have a lot more than you, there's going to be questions about that in a limited system, right? Why is there questions at all? It's because of symmetry and survival and the limited system. Justice emerges out of the notion that I can be considered one, and all of us need the same things, and we all have a physical universal ancestor. So we're sort of like family, whether we're direct family or not. We're all like clones of each other. If we talk about difference and sameness, if you account for sameness, we're like all the same, and we all need the same things. And so justice emerges in limited systems as a hard projection from physical determinism. So Christianity, the people that are Christians, they understand it, but they understand it indirectly, so they don't get to the core of it. And this is one of the points of this video, is to talk about how religions can use universality to cleanse their extremist, particularist, exclusion-based kind of mentality where they get off on creating another with universality. Universality can carry across all subjective particulars as a concrete affirmation of what is. It's not a new ideology, it's a description of what is and a realization that nobody has the right to take the life of another, and that it doesn't always have to be just all the way up to death and killing. It rolls back to bullying and, manipulative tactics That's the core of ethics. After a while, I studied philosophy. I studied the major religions, and I started to develop my philosophy of universality and universal humanism. And I made multiple stages of that philosophy. It's been called multiple things in the past. Just started to, get away from Christianity more and more. And it took probably 10 years. I mean, this is like leaving Christianity and probably any religion, it's like a breakup. You have a broken heart afterwards. You takes years to get over it. You find yourself doing things that you didn't even know were so ingrained in you. And after a while, you get over it. And I could never go back, because I ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so now I remember that, and so I couldn't go back even if I wanted to. But the point is, for you Christians, is I would never want to, because giving up reality is such a loss. And this is why I have another video on this channel going against Pascal's wager. The idea that you give up nothing if you become, if you believe in God, what have you lost? You've lost everything. You've lost your attention to reality, the context. You've added to the context of reality, so you've distorted it. Like people that are outside of these identity particularities, they use reality, objective reality, as the context for their lives. Whereas religious people say, not only am I going to add all this context over here when I reason with the overall context, I'm going to eliminate as much of the real context as I can. So the reasoning from religious perspectives becomes biased and fallacious by terms of reality. So this is just, if I'm standing outside of reality, here's the thing about objectivity. It's like, it's observer based. So like I can be part of a system and sort of like, I can put myself outside of it and view myself as an object in the system. I can be objective about evaluating the system. And so the idea that you can't escape it because you're part of it is not entirely true. You just have to consider yourself as part of an overall system. I think just religions don't have to disappear. And I think, atheism, by the way, atheism is not a thing, okay? Because religion is unnecessary. So to say that people are without God, we have to give them a name and they're part of this group, that misses the point that there's been no proof and no evidence and no definition of what God is. So there's no point in calling people atheist, because religion is unnecessary. So atheism is a name for the theists to call people that are non-theists. Atheists, quote unquote atheists themselves, should have zero name, because you're just people living by a context of reality. So the name atheism is a theist word, okay? It's not necessary for the rest of us. A lot of the point of this video is just to put out there that universality cuts across all identity particulars, and it's determined. All I'm doing is describing it, what it is. I'm giving it a definition. It's not really an ideology. It's a definition that we have to be aware of, and that it transcends identity particularity. And that identity particularity, I don't care if it's 2,000 years old, it doesn't transcend or negate universality, which is determined. Anything that does is the true sin of reality. It's the true sin, turning your back on universality or being diverted away from it before you understand it. If you guys like this kind of philosophical subject matter, help us grow the channel by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Thanks.